Heaven Shall Burn with their album The Wanderer. This is a band that, despite the size of their fan base, still feels like one of the better kept secrets in heavy metal. And they shouldn't be. In fact, they are a band that could be complementary with a group such as Lamb of God. Not because they necessarily sound similar, but really whenever you listen to these guys, you do have a little bit of a twinge of Lamb of God perhaps in your mind. Or In Flames, or maybe a combination of both. Maybe this was what happens whenever worlds collide, and somewhere I'm being sued. This is a melodic death metal band that has traces of metalcore that throws groove and really at times can just sort of go off of that trail and do whatever they want. That's the one thing I like about this group. They're never one that's going to settle for just one sound. They instead opt to, change things up a little bit every so often. So this is a 13-track affair. 3 years ago we talked about Veto and we're pretty high up on it, but 3 years can cause a lot of things to change. It's a new day, yes it is. So let's talk about The Wanderer. Now, what I like about this album is that The Loss of Fury, which is 2 minutes and 21 seconds to start this disc off, is not one that is your traditional opener. It does have lyrics associated with it. It serves almost like a groundwork for what we are going to get with Bring the War Home. And immediately whenever we get into this track, you can hear some of those In Flames capabilities surging from this group. Now wait a minute, I know whenever I say In Flames capabilities, a lot of you go, he means new In Flames, doesn't he? No, old In Flames. Melodic death metal In Flames. Closer link to Dark Tranquillity and At the Gates In Flames. That side of In Flames. The side that is actually able to use the pacing of melodic death metal and the Gothenburg sound advantageously to really thrust their career into the early stratosphere of being big in Europe. This is something that is showcased by this, but Heaven Shall Burn have their own take on it insofar as their lyricism, their growling is much deeper. This is something that has that Germanic root to it, where there's just a little bit of excess that's really thrust upon there, that gives it that extra oomph, that extra factor. It's something that gives it a very savage resonance, and based upon that, the track really carries over very nicely. Near the end of it, you hear a riff that sounds a little bit out of the Iron Maiden playbook. And based off of that combination, that's a hell of a start for this album. But going in the passage of the Crane, the very next track, once again the In Flameisms kind of showcase itself right in the introduction. You could almost hear this sort of soft pattern that then descends into absolute metallic chaos on perhaps a newer In Flames record, or even as one of those more, softer openings on an album such as Clayman, for example. But this is a track that definitely follows up Bring the War Home very, very nicely and gives it a nice counterbalance with that introduction. But the savagery and the way in which those vocals just assault your eardrums does not stop. And that's the one aspect of these tracks really early on that give it a real smooth listen. It's not something that's trying to be kind of screwed around with all that much. But I did say that Heaven Shall Burn was a band that liked to, kind of take some leaps. We'll get to that. Whenever we go on to They Shall Not Pass, that starts to showcase exactly what I mean, going into Downshifter. These are tracks that exceed the 5-minute mark, with They Shall Not Pass going 5.5 minutes and Downshifter being 6 minutes even. This is a group that's not afraid to take that leap and go into longer territory, and they're able to hold your attention, principally based around their songwriting. This is a group that's first album came out right at the turn of the millennium, so they're really about 16 years into crafting full-length albums, and their songwriting definitely showcases it. There's a certain maturity to it that rings true, and really that experience plays into their advantage. Longer tracks like this both have that savage notion that you got from the very first few, but still also have a certain maturity that keeps your attention. It doesn't feel like it's getting overly repetitive. In fact, with Downshifter, it feels like it's one of the strongest tracks on the album on the early onset. But stay with me, there's still a lot more to talk about. Such as their cover of Agent Orange, 2 tracks later, the old Sodom song. Man, this is a really well done cover. It captures that side that really Sodom was able to capture, the Teutonic thrash legend, but also gives it a Heaven Shall Burn twist. This isn't a track that feels like it's 100% thrash. It instead feels draped within their own sound, giving it its own personal signature, and still staying honorable enough to the original that it doesn't feel like a completely different track. It doesn't feel as though they took Agent Orange and transformed it to Agent Heaven Shall Burn, or Agent Purple, or name another color in the Crayola box. I know, I'm gonna have to wait 5 minutes for you to find a Crayola crayon box. It may not be easy to do. But I like the way in which they go about this cover. I think that it's really well tailored and executed. it again could be seen as a highlight. However, the real highlight is still yet to come, so you're going to have to continue to stay with me. I know, I'm asking a lot out of you. My Heart is a Compass goes into Save Me. My Heart is a Compass is about a 1 minute and 12-second long soft track full of melody, full of a kind of desolation in a weird way going into Save Me, which really couples with that desolation themology very well. But once again, getting back into Save Me, into Corium, going into Extermination Order, and A River of Crimson, once again, that savagery that you heard with the initial tracks on this album starts to replicate itself. It starts to showcase itself once again. At this stage, you're starting to pick up a little bit on the way in which these songs are put together. Some of the songwriting does start to feel a little bit derivative, but it's also something that's handled in a pretty nice way. It's something where they each have enough individuality to them to feel fresh, as opposed to feeling like they're just treading over the same tired ground over and over again to try to just make their way through the album and finally put it to rest. And the real reason that I can definitely proclaim that they're putting thought and effort into each one of these songs and definitely aim to make them 100% individual is the very final track, the 13th cut, which is The Cry of Mankind. This is 7 minutes and 35 seconds in length, and earlier on some songs we heard an introduction that was instrumental to the tune of about 1 minute and 20 seconds on some cuts, with Passage of the Crane being one of them. However, with The Cry of Mankind, it goes beyond the 2-minute mark. This is actually one that's lyrically kind of minimalist, but whenever the lyricism does come, it's one that has the absolute cry of mankind behind it. All of the savagery and the emotion is kind of stripped down into a more mourning style of vocal delivery, but it's still delivered with the same sinister nature. However, the music doesn't accompany it. Instead, the music continues to have this sort of dirgeous pattern to it, one that has a little bit more that actually seems in tune to perhaps some sludge metal, either that or even, tracing some of the boundaries of doom. It's resplendent. It's a beautiful track. And whenever you hear the clean vocals on this song, because they actually do exist, the hairs on your arms and really on your back start to stand up a little bit. It's something that comes out of nowhere and kind of hits you like a right hook. And it's so powerful for this track that it certainly bears, really, a lot of repeated listens. This is the true masterpiece on this album, and maybe the best Heaven Shall Burn song I've ever heard. For all of the different tracks that felt like early highlights, either that or standout tracks, The Cry of Mankind easily 100% takes the cake. And the best part about it is that it's the final track, which means it's the last representation of this album that you get, and you leave with the most powerful foot. Wow, what a statement that is. So once again, we come to the familiar crossroads of trying to assign a number to this. This is a 90 out of 100. Just call it flat. 9 out of 10. As I said, at times the songwriting can feel a little bit derivative during the second half, but it's not derivative enough where you start to get bored. It's instead just something where you can see some of the things happening before they do, but you're not exactly sure how it's going to get there. You're not too sure what pathway they're going to take. It's not just a straight line. And with the real benefit of The Cry of Mankind, it almost makes you forget about all those tracks that preceded that felt kind of derivative if they did at all. That's the best part about a track such as The Cry of Mankind being placed right there at the end. It can help you forget some of the things that weren't quite as good, or that you didn't enjoy quite as much. It leaves with a great and terrific final impression. But based off of that, this is also an album whose strength is definitely in the maturity of the songwriting. Even just from the past 3 years between Veto and this album, there seems to be leaps and bounds that have really improved Heaven Shall Burn's overall scope of how they approach their craft. And that's a good thing. That means that as they continue to age and mature, we might expect more things like this in the future. Not to say that the stuff that's happened previous to this is any bad, or bad at all, but it's definitely showcasing this band continues to morph and continues to really try new things. And that's a good thing for sure. But I want to know what you guys think about The Wanderer by Heaven Shall Burn. I also want to thank a representative over at Century Media for hooking me up with this. My name is coverkillernation. Please leave your thoughts on this album in the comments below. I'll talk to each and every one of you guys next time. Take care.